What if I told you that in 1947, a man discovered something so impossible, so terrifying, that the government buried his story for 70 years? What if those footprints you see in the mud after rain weren't always heading toward the horizon, but sometimes upward? Today, we're diving into the classified case of Dr. Edmund Blackwood, a geologist whose final expedition led him to question everything we know about gravity, reality, and what lies beyond our earthly prison. This is the story the authorities never wanted you to hear, the story of footprints that defied physics, a man who walked where no human should survive, and a discovery so disturbing that it was sealed in a vault beneath the Pentagon for decades. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change how you look at the sky forever. Dr. Edmund Blackwood was not your typical scientist. Born in 1898 in the remote village of Thornwick, England, he had always been obsessed with the impossible. While other children played with toys, Edmund collected stones that seemed to float slightly above his palm before dropping. His parents dismissed it as childhood imagination, but Edmund knew what he saw. By 1925, he had earned his doctorate in geology from Cambridge and gained a reputation for finding mineral deposits in places where logic said they shouldn't exist. His methods were unconventional, almost mystical. He would walk across barren landscapes and somehow sense veins of gold buried 50 feet below solid rock. Mining companies paid him handsomely, but they whispered that Dr. Blackwood had made a deal with something dark. The truth was far stranger. Edmund had discovered that certain geological formations created what he called gravitational anomalies, places where the Earth's pull weakened, where the fundamental forces of nature became negotiable. He documented 17 such locations across 3 continents, but he kept his findings secret. The world, he believed, wasn't ready for such knowledge. Then came the morning of October 13, 1940-7. Edmund was camping in Death Valley, California, investigating reports of strange magnetic readings in a remote canyon called Devil's Throat. The locals avoided the area, claiming their compasses spun wildly and their watches stopped working. Perfect conditions for Edmund's research. He woke before dawn to investigate. A sound he'd never heard before, rhythmic thumping, like massive footsteps, but coming from above. The sky was clear, no aircraft in sight, yet the sound continued, growing fainter as it moved toward the eastern mountains. That's when he saw them. Footprints. Human footprints. But they weren't in the sand beside his tent where they should have been. They were pressed into the solid rock face of the canyon wall, 12 feet above the ground, and they led upward. Edmund's hands trembled as he took photographs and measurements. The prints were fresh, still warm to the touch despite the frigid desert night. They belonged to a man, size 11 boots, with a distinctive wear pattern on the left heel. The impressions were deep, as if made by someone carrying enormous weight, but the rock showed no cracks or stress fractures. It was as if gravity had simply rotated. Following his scientific training, Edmund documented everything. The prints led up the canyon wall in a straight line, each step exactly 2 feet apart, maintaining perfect human walking rhythm despite defying every law of physics. At a height of 80 feet, they curved toward the sky and continued into empty air. But Edmund could still see them. Faint impressions in the morning mist. Invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Footprints walking through the clouds themselves, heading toward something Edmund Iesa couldn't comprehend. That's when he made his fatal decision. Edmund had spent his life studying gravitational anomalies, and he theorized that if someone could manipulate their personal gravity field, they might walk on any surface, even air itself. He had brought experimental equipment to Death Valley, devices that could theoretically create localized gravitational distortions. His journal, discovered years later, revealed his growing obsession. The prints are calling to me. I can feel the path they've carved through space itself, like a highway made of folded reality. Whatever walked here opened a door, and that door is still ajar. I must follow. Science demands it. For 3 days, Edmund worked frantically to modify his equipment. He rigged a harness connected to his gravity manipulation device, creating what he called a vertical compass. If his theories were correct, he could follow the Skywalker's path. On October 16th, at dawn, Dr. Edmund Blackwood stepped onto the canyon wall and began to climb. His journal entries from that day were found sealed in a metal box, weighted down with rocks at the bottom of Devil's Throat. Day 1 of ascent. The device works. I am walking on stone as easily as earth. The footprints above glow with residual energy, whatever made them possessed technology or abilities far beyond our understanding. Each step takes me further from the natural world and closer to something that watches from between the stars. Height, approximately 400 feet. The air is thin but breathable. Below me, Death Valley spreads like a map. I can see my abandoned camp, so small it could fit in my palm. The footprints continue upward, and I begin to understand this isn't just about defying gravity. Someone was running, fleeing, but from what? And why? Upward, into the emptiness between Earth and space. Height, 800 feet. I've made a terrible mistake. The footprints aren't leading towards something. They're leading away from something. And that something is down there, in Devil's Throat, waiting. I can feel it stirring as the sun sets. Ancient. Hungry. The canyon isn't just a geological formation, it's a containment system. And the Skywalker knew this. He ran upward because down was no longer safe. The last entry height, unknown. I am beyond the clouds now, walking through thin air on a path carved by forces I cannot comprehend. The device is failing. Soon I will have a choice: fall to Earth or continue forward into whatever realm the Skywalker discovered. I can see lights ahead, structures that exist in spaces between spaces. The Skywalker wasn't human. Nothing human could survive what I'm experiencing. But he left these prints as a warning, a trail leading away from the horror below. If you find this journal, seal Devil's Throat forever. Fill it with concrete and forget it exists. Some doors should never be opened, and some paths should never be followed. I go now to join the Watchers in the space above the world, because going back means facing what lies beneath. And that is a fate worse than any death among the stars. Edmund Blackwood was never seen again. The government recovery team found his equipment scattered across the canyon floor, along with his sealed journal and 47 photographs of footprints that shouldn't exist. They classified everything under national security protocols and declared Dr. Blackwood missing, presumed dead by misadventure. But the story doesn't end there. Every October 13th, local rangers report the same phenomenon: rhythmic thumping from above, moving across the desert sky. And in the morning, fresh footprints appear on the canyon walls of Devil's Throat. Not just Edmund's route, but new paths, branching patterns that suggest multiple Skywalkers traveling between Earth and whatever realm exists beyond our perception. The most disturbing detail: recent satellite imagery shows that the footprint patterns aren't random. They form symbols, messages written across the landscape in a language that predates human civilization. And each year, the messages grow more urgent, more desperate. Some researchers believe Edmund survived his ascent and joined a community of interdimensional refugees, beings who escaped some cosmic catastrophe by learning to walk between realities. Others think he encountered something so terrible that death would have been a mercy. But the truth might be simpler and more horrifying than either theory suggests. What if the footprints aren't leading away from something in Devil's Throat? What if they're leading toward it? What if every Skywalker, including Edmund, is being drawn to feed whatever ancient horror lies sleeping beneath the desert floor? What if the footprints in the sky aren't escape routes, but a slow-motion avalanche of victims walking through the air toward their doom? The case of Dr. Edmund Blackwood remains officially unsolved, buried in classified files that most government officials don't even know exist. Devil's Throat is now restricted military airspace, surrounded by fencing and warning signs that claim it's a geological hazard zone. But if you know where to look, you can still see them. Footprints pressed into impossible surfaces, trails that lead from Earth to sky, to places our maps cannot chart. And sometimes, on clear desert mornings, Witnesses report seeing figures walking through the clouds above Death Valley, following paths carved by those who went before. The next time you see footprints after a rainstorm, take a moment to check their direction. Most lead from here to there, following the simple logic of human travel. But some prints curve upward, defying gravity and reason, heading toward destinations that exist in the spaces between what we know and what we fear. Dr. Edmund Blackwood's final journal entry contained a warning. The sky is not empty. It never was. We simply lack the eyes to see its inhabitants and the wisdom to understand that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps some doors should stay closed and some paths should never be followed. But then again, if you're anything like Dr. Blackwood, you're already planning your own expedition to Devil's Throat, aren't you? You want to see those impossible footprints for yourself, to test the boundaries between the possible and the absurd. Just remember, those who walk in the sky rarely return to tell their stories, and those who do return, well, they're never quite the same. Sweet dreams.